You got to have some steel about you, like not to allow them to dominate you, right? That's the nature of this corner.
I'm a bit of a meek person. So
well, bro, like you got to find some. Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's a misunderstanding of what Christ is talking about when he says meek. Christ, meek doesn't mean weak.
I know.
Yeah, and the thing is,
did use polemic.
and he did use a whip.
We were on animals.
I disagree. That's not what the scripture says.
It is.
It says he drove them out, man and beast.
But you can yell at people and not whip them.
That's how you're imagining it. That's not what the scripture says. The scripture says he drove them out, man and beast.
I believe they're both driven out from his action. But I don't
Yeah, but I don't. Do you? What does a Jew do if you slap him on the cheek?
Well, he slaps him
Well,
down.
it doesn't
Right.
turn the other
So you've got these money changers who are in the temple and they think that they've got every right to be there. And then a Jew comes with a whip and he tries to drive them out and they outnumber him. What does a Jew do when someone tries to drive you out with a whip?
Probably use violence.
So Jesus got in a fight. The thing is, you're trying to read the New Testament not from its first century Jewish context, but from a medieval artistic representation.
Oh, I agree with that. A lot of people misinterpret that thing from.
But that's what
in
you're
the other
doing.
direction.
That is what you're doing right there. When Jesus, you've got to interpret the passages in John, and I think it's in Matthew, where it describes Jesus using a whip. You've got to interpret it from within the context of Second Temple Judaism. No, it's in two places in Scripture.
You know, you're probably right. I'm just saying.
I am right. It's in two places. One is in John, chapter 2, and the other one I'm not sure where it is. I think it's towards the end of Matthew, possibly, or maybe Mark. But the point is, or is it Luke?
It might be in.
It's one of the synoptics. It's in the Bible, right? Two places.
I just went and reread Matthew and Mark the other week.
Right.
So, like,
But the point is, bro, when you read that verse, you can't read it like a medieval Christian or like a 1700 Christian. You can't read it from within church culture, within church context. You've got to read that passage within its Jewish Second Temple Judaism. And Jesus got in a fight in that text.
This is a sincere question. What do you think of the fact that a lot of early Christians, though, did interpret that Christ forbid us to use violence?
Well, those Christians, I don't think...
Origen, Tertullian, and Justin Martyr, the ones I can remember.
Origen's not a church father. Tertullian's not a church father. Who's the other one?
Well, I mean, early Christians.
Right, but Origen...
Justin Martyr.
Justin Martyr, okay, he's a Christian. So I believe
I know Tertullian later apostatized.
Yeah.
But he wrote that when he had apostatized.
I'm not sure. I see.
God knows, only God knows.
God knows.
Okay.
Between him and God.
So, but the point is, firstly, the early church fathers don't have precedence over later church fathers. Later church fathers, including many doctors of the church, like Thomas Aquinas, accept the use of jus embellum, right? Just war, right? So we can't, and that's well established in the tradition. The church quite readily accepted the use of violence in certain circumstances.
I understand.
Right. So to answer your question directly, any Christian who argued, any early church father who argued for strict pacifism, I would say is an acceptable interpretation, but not the only possible interpretation. And this is one of those situations where you can have different interpretations, both of which are valid, because pacifism becomes a prophetic statement that we should always be directing ourselves towards peace, even in war.
We're for context, we're Mennonites, so that's like a kind of a
right.
thing,
Okay.
Sort of. Yeah.
I love the Mennonites. I love you guys. Right. I think that the idea of being a collected community, and a Benedict community, right, where you all live together, is actually everything that Scripture points to.
But that's why I get a lot out of the fact that I think. Thank you for saying it's a valid view, because a lot of people say like that's ridiculous or it's stupid.
No, it's a totally valid view.
But
it's a.
I'm not saying your view is totally invalid either. I disagree, but obviously there are people like Augustine believe in just. I like Augustine.
Yeah, but it's a prophetic view. It's a prophetic view to.
And it doesn't mean that Jesus is allowing murder or killing or anything, because getting into a fight isn't.
And also, Jesus is the God of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And He did direct Israel to war.
Yeah, but God can make the decisions, man can't.
Exactly. And that's why when Jesus said to His disciples, "Go and sell your cloaks and buy swords," He was showing to the church that it has the authority of the sword.
That's an interesting reading of that verse.
Right? And because when Peter went away, Christ didn't rebuke him for bringing or using a sword. He rebuked him for opposing because Peter had done it before, opposing the will of God that Christ should suffer and die. And Peter had done that earlier, remember? When he took Christ aside and he said, "Be it not unto you, Lord."
With the two swords, I always read that as being prophetic fulfillment, because he has to be numbered among the brigands. And that's why he said, "Oh, we have two swords, that's enough." Obviously, it's not enough to arm all the apostles, but it's enough for them to accuse him of trying to inspire a revolt.
Yeah.
But when Peter used the sword, Christ didn't tell him to throw the sword away.
He did, well.
No, he didn't. He said, "He who lives by the sword dies by the sword." Do I not have 12 legions of angels that I can call upon from heaven? Now, if we pray in the Our Father, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," if God has legions in heaven, what should he have on earth?
But it's not spiritual warfare.
I see it as spiritualized.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
I feel like we are his legions on earth. We're
Well, exactly.
right now,
There you go.
I don't
We
fight
are
with the sword, I
legions
fight with the
on earth.
word.
Right. But our spiritual war is fought in the flesh and the blood, is it not? With our flesh and blood. Right? So I would say, right, and this is where me and the Mennonites are going to disagree and part company. I would say that you could not. I like you two obviously know one another, right? I don't need.
We're married. Yeah.
Okay.
I can
Right.
know him. Like.
So
7 years of hell.
bless your heart. So I would say to you, right, that you could not claim to love your wife if you allowed her to be raped.
I mean, I wouldn't know.
Right. So if someone, God forbid, ever tried to rape your wife, like some sick jihadi, right? The loving thing for you to do would be to fight that jihadi to protect your wife.
I mean,
Other things that he could
I
do
think
apart
that
from
I
like.
put myself between him and her. I think.
So all right, so you put yourself between him and he starts battering you, and he batters you into unconsciousness and then rapes your wife. What have you achieved by that?
But I think in that situation, Rosie could also run away, and that would give her time.
Right, so you stand in the way, the guy knocks you out stone cold, you're running away, and then he chases up, catches up with her and rapes her.
I think you could resist while that was going on.
Thank you.
But don't kill
Right, 1 second. So if you are accepting that you can resist, then you are accepting that you can use violence.
I mean, again, I think the degree of the violence.
Yeah, I think.
No, you're trying to make a false distinction between killing and violence. They're not the same. There's no distinction.
How about Jacob when he was sent to preserve life?
Yeah.
You know, so him doing it, he's preserving life. He's not just doing it to take the life, he's doing it to preserve.
Exactly, and this is the argument that I'm trying to make, is that you would be justified, and you would be justified in using violence against a rapist. You would be justified because you love your wife, and you would be justified because you love yourself and your husband. And so, because of love, in certain circumstances, violence can be justified. No, it's not a free-for-all. That's why Jesus said, "He who uses the sword dies by the sword." Why do you think that's a false argument, sir?
I think it's a false argument because, let me analogize that to the tail wagging the dog. Okay, the principles of Christianity do not countenance violence in almost any circumstance, right? If someone slaps you on the cheek, what do? Turn the other cheek, right? If someone takes your coat, you give them your hat. Okay. That is not to say that when violence is performed on you or against you that you have to accept it. No, in a certain
Can you defend yourself?
Most definitely,
Violently?
if necessary.
So therefore you're on my side.
No,
You've
I'm
conceded
not,
my argument.
No. You're making a false equivalence. What I'm telling you is the principle of Christianity is to abhor violence at all times, okay, unless in the most extreme of circumstances. Now, in my church, the Catholic Church, we have a concept, if I can speak frankly and you'll excuse me, is complete bullshit, the idea of a just war.
I agree.
You know, it's complete
Not in
nonsense.
those exact words.
It's complete nonsense.
There's no.
Because
Nobody can point me to a just war that's
well,
happened.
look at the Crusades.
I could point you
Look
to
at
a
what
just
they
war.
did.
Which one?
Crusades.
That's not a just war.
I don't
Yeah, it
know
was a
enough
just
about
war.
the Crusades.
It was a just
It
war.
was not a just war.
Yeah, it was a just war, and here's why it was a just war. Right. Firstly, I believe that you've already accepted that in certain circumstances you can use violence. So in this discussion, one second. You've already accepted that we can use violence. So you're already
agree with that.
I mean,
I don't
okay.
agree with your interpretation of my view.
I can't. I'll let other people decide. I'll
Fair
finish
enough.
my point. So the reality is that the reason why the Crusades were just is because Muslims had invaded Christian land. There had been 7 centuries of Islamic aggression against Christians before the First Crusade.
I'm familiar that
The Crusade was called to defend persecuted Christians who were being persecuted in their own homelands. Now that doesn't mean, nor does it mean that I am arguing, every action and event that happened inside the Crusades was just. I don't agree that the Crusaders behaved justly in every occasion and way, but the Crusaders were fighting a just war because it was a defensive war to liberate Christians in their own homeland from persecution by Muslim occupiers who had been aggressive to the Latin West for 700 years.
Those who live by the sword
Die by the sword. Which is what your point is. Christians should abhor violence, but abhorring violence doesn't necessarily lead to a commitment to pacifism.
I mean, if somebody wants to try and kill me, they'll just send me to heaven. Like, I think it's more powerful and it's more Jesus-like.
So you're making a prophetic argument, and that's why I'm saying you just made a prophetic argument. No, I believe that within the scope of the church, there is room for the prophets. The New Testament speaks about prophets, teachers, evangelists. You haven't even heard what I've got to say yet, right? So because there are room for prophets in the church and prophecy in the church, therefore there is room for prophetic action in the church. And so your argument is a valid one, but it is just that, a prophetic argument. My argument is an argument based on love, which means that yours is an exceptional argument and mine is the general rule.
Don't forget when Peter slew Malchus's ear,
He just
he
spoke
just
of
said,
that.
"Put your sword away."
We've done this.
Yeah.
But that was
Yeah, we
good
talked about
because the scripture had to be
that you
fulfilled.
just-
There's
Exactly.
a reason for that.
Yes, we talked about that earlier. Yes, you're right.
I think
point
a kind of
that
powerful
you
thing
just
for
made
me
about you
about being
going
a
to
Christian,
heaven.
that rejection of violence is that I know God is on my side, and
Probably
I
older than all
know
of
for,
you
on the just
together.
war debate, like a more interesting example, and we go to a church that doesn't say pacifism, so it's
Yeah.
a fun one to have with our pastor and stuff. But is how, for instance, in World War One wasn't a just war. I think most people would try and argue that it was. But where was the church in World War One telling Christians don't fight on both sides? Where were all the Christians? Where was the Church of England? Where was the Lutheran Church in Germany saying this isn't a just war? Don't fight. That would be sinful.
But that is a separate argument, and it's actually irrelevant to the question of whether the apostles committed us to pacifism. Shall we just go over there a minute? We're just going to go over there a minute.
Psalm chapter 11, God's soul hates the lover of violence. There's a difference between violence if it's necessary.
Yes.
Then someone who does that, they love doing it.
Exactly. That's it.
Psalm 11, Bob,
Yeah, that's right. So my point to you is, you're absolutely right. So my point to you is that the statement you've made is a separate question to whether the apostles teach we can use violence. If you think about what love is always a selfless action for the benefit of the other, right? And you have a duty to love your wife, you have a duty to love the church, you have a duty to love your neighbor as yourself, right? You have a duty to love your enemies, right? But that means that when these duties of love come into conflict and an order emerges, you have a duty to love your neighbor as you love yourself, and you have a duty to love your wife as you love your own body, but you don't have a duty to love your neighbor as you love your wife.
I mean, this is what I struggle with, is for me, again, from my perspective, is when Christ tells me to love my enemy, as hard, as really difficult that seems, I see that as still being boundless. And even in a warfare situation or where I'm being attacked, I just don't think I'm permitted to kill them. I don't see how I can love my enemy and kill them.
But I mean, John of Damascus addressed this question when the Muslims in the 7th century said to him, They said to him, you
on my
Christians,
reading
what?
He's on my reading list.
Yeah, so John of Damascus said, when the Muslims said to him, you say that you love your enemies, and yet here you are drawing the sword. And John of Damascus said, yes, if you insult us and harm us, we don't fight. But if you harm our brother, we draw the sword and we fight you to the death. Somewhat along those lines, right? The point is that the action to violence that flows out of the fact that we are a community and we should love one another. You cannot claim to love the brother who you can see if when you see him in need, when he needs a blanket or when he needs food, you say to him, God bless, may you be warm and may you be well fed. You've got to show your faith by your works. So when your brother needs protection from a disgusting, vile jihadi, love demands that you fight, if necessary, that jihadi to protect your brother.
Rejoicing in truth, not wrongdoing.
Sorry?
Corinthians 13, love is patient, kind,
Yes.
not envious, boastful, conceited. It rejoices in truth, not wrongdoing. So if someone's attacking you,
And it also says love defends.
But I feel like a stronger testament would be to not use violence, or to try and find. I mean, if you look at the history of Mennonites and Anabaptists, the immense amount of persecution as a group that we suffered is insane. But the fact that I think that we never raised the sword in response, that we went to our dads as martyrs, I think is a stronger testament.
But that's a prophetic argument. But I'm arguing from the general principle of love. What you're doing, and I agree, it's a valid argument, right? Like, I am not saying it's stupid. Right?
I don't think you are, don't worry.
Right, but because you're making a prophetic argument, not a moral obligation, right? Your argument is prophetic. It's about witness. It's about testimony. It's about testifying to the importance of peace. It's about testifying to the being a witness to the gospel of peace, to the kingdom of peace, right? And I agree, right? It's great, but that's not what flows out of the general principle of love. The general principle of love in a fallen world requires that when Christians are being persecuted, that we cannot do nothing.
I mean, I would do something, I just wouldn't use violence.
Right, but the point is, love, let me ask you this question again, because I think we kind of settled this debate right in the first 5 minutes. If someone right now, started physically attacking your wife, would you physically if someone physically started attacking your wife, are you just going to stand there and let them beat her up?
I would put myself in between them.
Right, and then what? What do you do when you stand in between them?
I would attempt to put myself on them. And
right, but the moment you do that, you've used violence. The moment you grab, but the moment you grab someone in the context of a fight, you've used an act of violence. Granted, it's very minimal. It's not as much violence as I would use, because I'd be jabbing the guy in the eye with the umbrella, right? I'd be punching him in the face, right? I'd be kicking him in the butt, like up the ghoulies. I'd be grabbing his crotch and I'd try to crush it. I'd stick my thumb in his eye and I'd try and push it right in. But the point is, we might be on different ends of the spectrum, but we both use violence.
I think there is some, like we have a thing called like two kingdoms theology, so
Yep.
basically the idea that obviously God has ordained the government to wield the sword, which is not done in vain. I just don't believe that Christians should participate in that violence. But for instance, if there was a war going on between two armies, and actually you can see this in Justin Martyr writes about this, is I would pray for the army that doesn't want to kill Christians to win, despite that I wouldn't personally go and take up a sword and fight alongside
John
them.
the Baptist, what
Right.
did he say about the soldiers, the ones that were soldiers?
Yeah.
Inexact. He was
Yeah.
telling them how to conduct.
But his argument works with that. So, but the thing is, you're making an argument that you've inherited from Augustine. The idea of the two cities, the city of God and the city of the world, right? That duality, obviously it is apostolic, because church government emerged in a Roman Empire that had its own government, right? Also, you appeal to the church fathers, but Augustine is a church father, Ambrose is a church father, Thomas Aquinas is a church father, so on and so forth, and they believe in the idea of a just war, right? Which is a Roman concept.
Yeah.
They've Christianized a Roman concept.
Obviously there are people, I'm not denying that no one believed in just war, but I think there is a consensus among the 2nd and 3rd century.
But my point is, I think you're being selective in just stopping with the early church fathers, rather than looking at including the later church fathers. And I think that's arbitrary. I think you're doing it because it suits your argument to do it.
I mean, it's
if you're
because
consistent.
I agree with them.
Exactly, it's arbitrary. You're choosing the church fathers you agree with.
Yes.
Now, but the point is, the moment you accept the authority of the church fathers, then we just keep going with the church fathers, and the church fathers disagree with the idea of pacifism.
I use them in the sense that I don't think church fathers can ever be wrong. For instance, I'm not a Roman Catholic, but actually also is not their position.
I'm not a Roman Catholic either.
I'm not saying you are. I've gathered that actually, but I thought you were.
Yeah.
Is that I point to it, or those early fathers, as an example of this is not a novel position. It does have, there are clearly Christians close to the apostolic era that believed it.
Yep.
And a lot of people dismiss the Christian pacifist position as just being this novel liberal thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a liberal at all. I'm very,
Yeah.
very conservative.
No, I know, Mennonites. I know. Right, but the point is, right? You made a statement. You made a statement about the idea that Christians shouldn't participate in politics, and I would say that that is not biblical. Let me lay out my case for you.
Go ahead.
Your mind will go to, I'm sure, the passage in Matthew where it says, "Render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and render unto God what belongs to God." But what do the Psalms say about the earth and everything in it?
It all belongs to Christ.
Right.
It's all, every knee shall bow. and
Yes.
all that.
So when Jesus said, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God," everyone heard, well, everything belongs to God, nothing belongs to Caesar. Caesar belongs to God. God establishes government.
Romans 13.
Paul himself states that God establishes government.
Yes.
And Paul himself tried to convert rulers. Remember when he was in front of King Agrippa?
No,
Well,
of
we
course.
should convert
Right.
everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
So when King Agrippa becomes a Christian, there's nothing. Remember, Paul said, like, I want you to be like me in every way apart from these chains. He also wrote in his letters, if you were entered as a slave, continue as a slave. If you were a free man, continue as a free man. If you were single, continue in the state that you were in. Right? So if you were a king and you became a Christian, following Paul's teaching, what do you remain?
Well, I mean, I would infer from that, for instance, that if there was a prostitute, they shouldn't continue
Yeah.
being a prostitute. So in a similar way, if you're a king, I guess you could be a peaceful king in theory, but or there was a way to restructure it. But I would say that in a lot of cases, if you're a king and you kind of rely on a violent army underneath you, then yes, you would have to step down.
But God didn't establish prostitution. God did establish government.
That's, yes.
Right,
yeah.
so your argument is flawed because the reason why prostitution is something that should be stopped is God never established it. It's not part of the teleological nature of the universe. It isn't something that points towards God. Government points towards God, which means that it is supposed to be ordered according to Christian teachings and principles, which can only be done if rulers are themselves converted and still rule.
The way I see it, like Romans 13, which is sort of the passage that all the debate gets caught up in, is Romans 13 is referring to governments that are appointed to rule over a sinful society. And
Yeah.
the church is a separate thing, that we're not to be part of that we're not to participate in them or wield the sword within them. It's referring to a separate order.
Yeah.
It's not referring to an order that has to be Christianized.
Right, well, unfortunately though, the early church fathers, when they were objecting, for instance, like the early church fathers said, let he who's become a Christian not wear the purple, right? The reason why they did that is because for you to be a legate in the Roman Empire, you had to praise pagan gods, you had to give incense to Caesar. And that was the objection of the early church fathers to the Christianization of the legates.
I've seen this argument before, and it's actually a bit blurrier, where there are cases where the objection appears explicitly to be to holding a magisterial office, and I believe that's with Tertullian. There's a book by
Tertullian wasn't a church father.
I mean, he's an early Christian in the sense.
He's an early Christian, he's an ecclesiastical writer, but we can't use him in the group of church fathers because he's not an early church father. Same with Origen, he is not an early church father. So you can't use him as part of your argument.
But, I mean,
they're just ecclesiastical writers.
Just to extend the parameters, maybe church father's not the best thing to say. Okay, you know more than this than I do. Do you think though that like when those people write, it does show that that was a view held by a lot of Christians at the time in the apostolic age?
Right, so then what we have to understand is, we've got to ask this. If it was the case that it was a deeply entrenched belief and teaching of the early church, that Christians and the Roman Empire are two separate things and one shouldn't penetrate the other, right? Why do we find after the Edict of Milan that wall just evaporates so quickly? So that in less than 100 years from the Edict of Milan and the Battle of Milvian Bridge, which Christians believe was inspired by a vision of the Christ, that we get Theodosius I and the Christianization of the Roman Empire, without any resistance at all from any church father. No church father argues against that interpenetration.
So I don't know enough about that event specifically to come back at you with it, so I will go home and look into it. So for now I concede to you.
Yeah.
But in some cases, again, referring to the other thing about wearing the purple is some of these that I've read into, the traditional presentation of it isn't quite accurate, and I would be surprised actually if I do read into this. And if I'm wrong, I'll come back and say that I'm wrong, or I'll email you and say I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I could very well be. I'm not saying I'm not.
It was also that these legates were commanded by the Caesars to persecute the Christian.
But it's that there are other things in that same period that do seem to explicitly say the objection is to just holding magisterial office and not the pagan element, like
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's in the context that the legates, it's like the Roman centurions that rather died than carry out commands to execute Christians.
Yes.
Right? They were centurions. They were in the army. They were not anathematized. They were like John the Baptist when he said to the Romans, be happy with your pay and don't extract money from people. They were Christians inside the Roman legions. And the church fathers were not saying to these Roman legionnaires, you should leave the Roman legion.
This is actually a debate also in these early Christian writings, where some appear to believe that you can serve in the centurions in an auxiliary role, but you can't kill, while others believe you can't serve in it at all. It's more where I don't have a clear position either way on that one. But again, I don't think it's so clear-cut as they're saying, like, oh yeah, you can go out into an army and fight with a sword and kill.
But if you are an auxiliary in an army, are you helping other people to kill?
In a police role, it's more. So a lot of centurions also serve as like a police.
But don't police use violence?
Yes, no, they do. But what I'm saying is that necessarily doesn't.
Right, hold on one second. Because the debate that we're having is whether Christians can use violence. You have just conceded that the early church fathers recognized legionnaires as Christians acting like police officers, and police officers use violence to uphold the law, which Rome, in the Romans 13, is sanctioned by Paul, that says that they have the power of the sword. So therefore, using your own early church fathers and scripture, some of them, not all of them, and scripture, we have developed another strong argument that Christians can use violence and can be involved in the state. So in other words, you claiming that Christians shouldn't be involved in the state is undone by your own argument.
Cornelius was the last to resign his position when he got with the Holy Spirit and come in, didn't he? They didn't know where in Acts does it say, Cornelius, you're a Christian now, stop.
Yeah, there's no example of Cornelius abandoning his position.
We don't know what happened to Cornelius, but that's what I'm saying. The standard response to that would be we don't know what he did afterwards. But the general point I'm making is I do concede that some of them say, no, you can serve in the government or you can serve in an auxiliary role, but you still can't kill.
Right, but have we established that Christians can be involved in government and can use violence?
I mean, I can't say either way hardline.
Well, hold on one second. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim that early church fathers said that Roman centurions could only serve in an auxiliary role, like a police officer, but then say that they can't use violence, because that's exactly what a police officer does.
There were others that disagreed that they could serve at all.
Right. And I'm saying that the reason why they disagreed is because of the way that people like Diocletian, Nero and others were using the centurions against the Christians, and the fact that the cult of the Caesar was an essential part of what it meant to be a legionnaire.
Can I recommend you a book on this topic? It's very scholarly, and it's actually I found it very helpful. And a lot of what I'm saying comes from this book. So
yeah,
it's a book called "The Early Christian Attitude to War" by a guy called C.J. Cadoux. It's spelled C-A-D-O-U-X.
Yeah.
He was a Quaker, obviously, but quite respected historian for early Christianity in the 1940s, 1950s.
Yeah.
And
when the Quakers were still Christian.
Yeah, at that point they were. They hadn't gone. He was. I looked into his background.
They hadn't been taken over by the New Age at that point. point.
Yeah, no, I've looked into this guy and he was solid, but his scholarship is good, and he goes through that the main debate wasn't around whether or not you could kill. He thinks the broad consensus was you could never kill, but it was, can you still serve in government or the police without killing or using violence?
Yeah.
And that's the debate. And I'd say I don't know exactly where I stand on that.
Yeah.
I personally wouldn't serve in government myself. I wouldn't serve in the police because I specifically wouldn't want
Whereas
to
I think that what Christians should be doing and should be aiming at is establishing a new Christendom. The Christendom that we have lost, we should work towards building another one. And that means that we should take over government, we should take over all positions of power, influence and authority, and we should use government and law to direct people towards the good, and ultimately that is directing people towards the Christ.
I would want obviously the government to enforce things that are more favourable towards Christianity or are good, but I just personally wouldn't participate in that function.
And the thing is, whilst I agree that as a Christian you can have an understanding of your personal life that is a committed pacifist, prophetically, for me, at this point when you say that Christians shouldn't be involved in politics, which is what you're saying, right? I don't want to misquote you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it depends when we say involved in politics, what
Not
we mean by that.
completely.
Like, I think if you say, like, for instance, as a Christian, I'm against abortion, I think the government should make it illegal, which I am. I went on March for Life.
Yeah, we went
Yeah.
on March for Life.
Right, so-
I would want the government
If
to
that's
ban it, but I
politics,
personally wouldn't run for office to go and do it.
So what you want Christians to be involved in politics, but not to get involved in political parties.
That's probably a more accurate
Right.
statement, yeah.
And so you want pagans to come to the conclusion, pagans that have sacrificed children for thousands of years, you want pagans to understand that killing babies is wrong.
This is the thing, is that when there's enough Christians, I mean, if there was a massive revival, I don't think they'd be able to do it.
So what you're saying is Christians should always be ruled by non-believers.
Again, I don't know clearly exactly where I stand on the idea that you could be a Christian.
What happens?
As long as you avoid violence.
What happens, right? And we have this in real history. This really did happen. What happens if 100% of the population wants to become Christian?
Did that actually happen somewhere?
Yes, in the Roman Empire,
100%.
pretty much. Right. After Theodosius the First and the Second.
I mean,
Right.
praise God. I mean, I think it's such a social revolution.
But let me ask you this question, right? In this hypothetical situation, right, where everyone becomes Christian again, who rules us?
I would say the church.
There you go. So that means that you do believe that Christians can be involved in politics
Well, I would say the church.
and political structures.
The structure I would support Christians moving into is church governance, to the point where, like, everyone is a Christian. We wouldn't even need the state. We could just have church governance run everything.
Right. So essentially,
It would be a state in a sense.
but essentially, that is what Christendom is. It's the idea that the church takes over everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for that.
Right? The only difference that me and you have is that I believe that the institutions of the church should be separate from the institutions of the state. And the reason why I believe that the institutions of the church should be independent from the institutions of the state is because when you read the New Testament carefully, Christ founds a community and then the apostles build a government over that community. But the apostles, in building that government over that community, recognize a worldly government.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with that.
Right, but the
What I'm
point
saying
is,
is
one
I would
second.
like to see the
So
worldly
that,
government pass away in time.
but that means normatively speaking, we've got two forms of government: church government and secular government. But
if we were
both should be.
Christian, we
But
wouldn't have need of the secular one.
no, we would. I would argue. Well, actually, no. Let me pull back a bit.
Do you know what's
Actually, one second. Wait. Actually, I want to pull back a bit because
No, go
I
on.
am not
join this.
I am not ideologically committed to the idea of two forms of government. It's just that tends to be how Christians have done it.
Yeah.
But I would be happy for one form of government for the church to rule it all, because Christians aren't committed to a form of government.
I think in a world where, are you familiar with who the
What, sorry?
Are you familiar with who the Hutterites are?
The Hutterites? Yeah, I know about the Hutterites. Sorry,
I
bro.
would say, like, in a completely
Sorry, bro.
100% Christian society, we would all just kind of live like the Hutterites or something anyway. So we wouldn't
Right.
really have need of a state as we understand it.
Right, but now we have to recognise that we live in a world of sin,
Yes.
and that there will always be sin, and therefore there will always be need for a
I don't
worldly
expect
government.
that to happen.
Yeah, okay, of course.
I understand that, but that's why I think like communities like that, or the Mennonites or the Amish, is how we survive in that world of sin without violating our Christian principles in regards to doing things in a Christian manner or a Christ-like way without using worldly systems of force, etc.
Yeah, and stopping rapists by force is a Christian thing to do. Stopping jihadis by violence, and if necessary killing them, is a Christian thing to do. Because a jihadi is a man who has chosen to live by the sword. Christ said that such people who are so bent towards violence will die by the sword. It's just a natural reality.
I don't think it's me that's taking up the sword against them. I think
But the point is that I think C.S. Lewis called this moral cowardice.
I don't like the idea that it's moral cowardice.
C.S. Lewis called this moral cowardice. He's a modern church father.
All I have to say is, the Anabaptists, we produce more martyrs than most of the other sects did, and we're not unwilling to die. We're not scared.
I think the Catholics might argue with that argument.
At this instance from about 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
when they had the government pass a bill,
Yeah.
it goes to the House of Lords. I can't remember exactly how many bishops were in the House of Lords, and that bill didn't get passed because of one vote that the clergy using the clergy vote. So that one vote, it was so important to stopping that legislation getting passed.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can play a pivotal role in certain things that
I'm going to hold your bag.
It's all right. Thank you, though. So my point is,
I will think about everything you said, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not
Are
like
you going on
dismissing you.
Tuesday?
I
Where's Welby thing?
yeah, where?
Okay, we're going. As
Oh
well.
right, well I'll see you there.
We're actually moving in 2 weeks, and I don't think we'll be back in Speaker's Corner for a
Got to
while.
go to a friend's child's baptism or a bit
Right.
on that, but we're
I wanted to give you a book,
Yeah.
but the book that I had in mind, I will give to you when we meet at the Where's Welby thing.
Would you accept if I gave you the CJ Cadeau?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I-
I think it's very scholarly. It's
Your
very
books
well written.
belong to me. My books belong to you.
There you go. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking.
Anyway, I'll give you a book
You're
to.
an intellectual giant.
Really,
and I'm
really
learning
lovely.
a lot every time
Peace
I
be
do.
with you, brother.
Peace
Peace be with you,
as well.
sister.
Be with you too.
And
Thank
God bless you
Yeah,
both.
see you on Tuesday.
See you on Tuesday, God willing.
Bob's Corner, don't
Yeah, God willing. Peace with you. Are you a Mennonite as well? Or are you just like the Mennonites? just hanging out with them.
He's friends with some of our
They're wonderful
crazy
people.
Mennonite guys.
I really do think that you guys have something amazing to share in the Benedict option that the rest of the
That's what I
Christendom.
see as we're doing politically, is we're just building another society, and I think it's better than the one we're in.
I agree.
Why bother with this one?
I agree. Anyway, we'll talk again.
Yeah, no problem.
God bless. Take care.